Police are supposed to protect us. They're supposed to go after criminals, crime syndicates, and uncover corruption. What they're definitely not supposed to do is be a part of these crime syndicates, criminal activity, and corruption. And what this commission and the events leading up to it have taught us is that currently in South Africa, the criminal justice system cannot be trusted. And what it's going to do is leave a wake of South Africans who are unable to trust the powers that are supposed to be their first line of trust. Hey everyone, welcome to the first ever episode of the Newsroom pod where we discuss current cultural and political events and try to dissect the little details. There has been a lot happening in South Africa recently, some good and some not so good, but one thing that has been on everyone's minds and in everyone's newspaper is the Madlanga Commission. I think that's pretty much the only thing that we've been thinking and talking about recently.
I swear it's been showing up in my dreams.
Yeah, me too.
So we do have a lot to cover from week 1 to 5 of this commission.
Yeah.
And there is so much happening that we're not going to be able to get into all the little details.
I think that would take us like a year.
Yeah. But, we're going to try our best to cover the most important parts of everyone's testimony. Okay, so before we get into it, we need to go over the difference between the ad hoc committee and Madlanga Commission because there is a lot of overlap and it does get confusing.
Okay, so the Madlanga Commission and the ad hoc committee are both investigating Mkhwanazi's allegations and general corruption within the criminal justice system. The Madlanga Commission is part of the executive branch. It was gazetted by the president and it essentially answers to the president. Now, there isn't a time limit on the Madlanga Commission, but it doesn't have the power to arrest or make specific judgments and calls on who should be arrested and what action should be taken. Essentially, what it does is it uncovers details about this corruption and it can make recommendations to the president. And then at that point, it's up to Cyril to decide what happens.
Right, so the ad hoc committee was set up by Parliament, which is the legislative branch of government. So the ad hoc committee can make recommendations to the legislation about which policies and legislations to change. But it's up to the National Assembly to decide what they do with these recommendations.
Okay, so before we actually get into what's happened in the commission so far, we should talk about the most important figures involved. Obviously, there are a lot of people involved in this commission, but we're just going to talk about the top people that you'll hear us mentioning over and over again. The first person and most important person, arguably, that we have to talk about is General Mkhwanazi. If you know anything about this commission at all, or anything about what has come out of this commission, then you have definitely heard his name. So he is a police general from KwaZulu-Natal who worked within the Political Killings Task Team. The Political Killings Task Team, aka the PKTT, is basically an organization that worked towards uncovering and investigating politically charged murders. Now, Mkhwanazi was responsible for overseeing operations, managing budgets, and ensuring accountability within the KZN police force. The reason that he is so important in this commission, in case you didn't know, is because he held a press briefing on the 6th of July to accuse multiple members of the South African Police Service of being involved in a mass-scale crime syndicate. And why this is important is because this was the crime syndicate that was involved in the politically motivated murders that the PKTT was investigating. So he laid out a lot of allegations. Shantae, do you want to get into some of the allegations that he made?
Yeah. So firstly, Mkhwanazi came out and he said that the decision to disband the PKTT was because they were investigating criminal syndicates that involved politicians, law enforcement officers, prosecutors, and members of the judiciary. Mkhwanazi also accused Mchunu of disbanding the PKTT to protect his associates.
So now that we've mentioned him a few times, we probably do have to go over who Senzo Mchunu actually is because he, again, is very important in this case.
Right, so he was the police minister from the 30th of June 2024 up until his recent suspension in July of 2025. He's also a member of the ANC and has been a cabinet member since 2019. And despite his suspension, he's still involved in politics to this day.
So what's interesting about Mchunu is that he was considered one of the good guys until Mkhwanazi came out with all of these allegations. What's even more interesting is that because he's a police minister, he was essentially Mkhwanazi's boss. I don't know that I would be able to go after my boss in the way that Mkhwanazi did, but props to him. But we can't talk about Senzo Mchunu without talking about his associates.
Okay, so the first person that we have to talk about is Vusi Musi Katmahlala. So he's a businessman, but he's also known as a tenderpreneur by the press. Katmahlala is the director of multiple companies, including Medicare 24, Cat VIP Protection, and Black AK Trading. He's also been found as an individual involved in the Tembisa corruption.
Importantly, he was also arrested in 2024 for attempted murder of a former lover and money laundering. And he was given a 360 million rand contract linked to health services that was cancelled for corruption and fraud. Now, Senzo Mchunu has denied any relation to Katmahlala, but there is evidence of their correspondence, and we're going to pull that up now. Okay, so this is a statement from Senzon Mfunu's X account where he basically says that he's never met Kat Maklala, he's never spoken to him, and he has never received anything from him. But he does say that he initiated a review of the SAP's tender that was awarded to him, the 360 million rand contract that we just talked about. So even though Senzon Mfunu claims that he never actually met Kat Maklala, he does admit that there was some form of correspondence between the two. Whether it was through representatives or directly is kind of unclear. Then we have to talk about another one of Senzon Mfunu's associates, Brown Makhotsi. Okay, so Brown Makhotsi is a businessman, and essentially Mkonazi accused him of being a middleman between Senzon Mfunu and Kat Maklala. But Senzon Mfunu referred to him as a comrade instead of an associate, which we just discussed, I think basically means that he thinks he's not as close as an associate would be. The word comrade to me feels like you're quite close, but I don't know. Maybe I don't understand the political lingo. Wait, did he refer to him
as a comrade rather than an associate?
So he thinks he's close?
No, like he's basically saying that, oh yeah, comrades are like further apart than associates.
Well,
associates have a closer relationship.
I would think that associates were...
Yeah.
Okay, whatever.
Brown Makhotsi is also a member of the ANC. And despite him being a normal person, Mkonazi has also accused him of having access to confidential SAPS documents.
Then we have to talk about Shadrach Sibiya. So he's the former deputy police commissioner, but he was also placed on leave after Mkonazi's allegations, as Senzon Mfunu was as well. So he was accused by Mkonazi of interfering with dockets held by the PKTT. There were 121 dockets found in Sibiya's office that were of the PKTTs. And he's linked to suspects involved in the murder of the Q-Tech engineer Armin Swart. But that's not the only politically motivated murder he's linked to a few others as well. Okay, so now that we've gone through everyone, let's get into week one of what actually happened during the commission. So it started with General Mkonazi's testimony. And essentially what he did is describe why the PKTT was so successful, or at least why he thought it was so successful. And he pointed out the fact that the PKTT, which was just supposed to be operating within KwaZulu-Natal, ended up operating within the Eastern Cape because of its high success rate. And then he talked about how despite the fact that the PKTT was so successful, there was a transfer of 121 case dockets to the national office where they sat untouched for months.
So he said that the PKTT continued to work despite the disbandment, albeit with fewer numbers. And as we said before, he says that Mfunu's decision to disband the PKTT was outside of his authority. Mkonazi also breaks down the murder of Armin Swart in his testimony.
And this is a very important part of the commission as a whole that we should get into a bit more. Okay, so Armin Swart was an engineer for this company called Q-Tech. Now, the idea is that he was killed over a case of mistaken identity. Essentially, people believe that the assassins thought that he was a more senior, different employee, which he was not. Now, in terms of why he was killed, Q-Tech, again, this engineering company, uncovered fraud in a Transnet contract. Essentially, what they found is that railway material prices had been inflated by 4,500%.
Okay, now the PKTT was investigating the murder of Armin Swart, and this investigation led to the arrest of a fourth suspect. So they also obtained a warrant to search Maklala's business. And the investigation as a whole uncovered how there were connections within the criminal underworld and showed how SAPS had been infiltrated by criminals.
In Mkonazi's testimony, he also talked about the connection between Brown Makhotsi and Senzon Mfunu.
So Mkonazi became aware that Brown Makhotsi had access to information that he shouldn't have had, and this was because of his own actions.
Basically, how Mkonazi found out about this is that Makhotsi sent him WhatsApps complaining about a smear campaign that he was facing. And in these WhatsApps, he showed Mkonazi documents that he shouldn't have had access to, police documents. And Mkonazi believes that Makhotsi had access to these documents because Senzon Mfunu shared too much with him. Those are the most important details that were outlined in week one, but let's move on to week two. During week two, there was a big agreement in a few testimonies that we need to talk about. Okay, so Fanny Masemola, Elaine Harrison, and Petronella van Rooyen all took the stand, and they all agreed on one thing. And this one thing is that Senzon Mfunu did not have the authority to disband the PKTT in the manner that he did. Now, each testimony does reveal a unique perspective on this. So let's start by going through Fanny Masemola's testimony on this.
Right, so Fanny Masemola, the National Police Commissioner, took to the stand on the 22nd of September. And his testimony covered the difference between National Commissioner and Police Minister. So Fanny Masemola explains that a police commissioner is responsible for setting the operational details, and the police minister sets broad policies and priorities.
So basically, the minister shapes priorities, but he can't get into the nitty-gritty of the who, what, where, and how. And importantly, he doesn't have the authority to shut down an entire division. So basically, Fanny Masemola said that Senzon Mfunu's decision to disband the PKT essentially overtook the role of the police commissioner, his role. He did also say that Mfunu did not seek advice from him on the disbandment of the PKTT. Masemola did also reveal that he asked Cyril Ramaphosa to discuss the issue of the disbandment with Senzon Mfunu. But apparently, Ramaphosa said that Senzon Mfunu did not say anything about a set outcome. So basically, Masemola's testimony showed that Senzon Mfunu went about disbanding the PKTT without directly warning those who were involved. involved. And importantly, what his testimony also did is show the differences between how him and Senzo Mchunu thought about the PKTT. He ultimately thought that it was a lot more successful than Senzo Mchunu thought. His testimony also highlighted a meeting that took place on the 27th of March. And he said that at this meeting, Senzo Mchunu was very angry that the PKTT was continuing onwards. Masemola also said that during this time, he heard rumors that the dockets that were meant to be reported in were actually at the police head office, which they were not supposed to be at.
He also said that phone records show how Sibiya was implicated in the forceful disbandment of the PKTT. He also says that Sibiya's urgency to shut down the PKTT shows that he wants to protect these criminal cartels from investigation. This shows that he probably had deeper connections to a criminal cartel. He also accuses both Sibiya and Mchunu of disbanding the PKTT in order to protect criminals that were already under scrutiny.
So a big part of what we saw with the testimonies in week 2 was how they highlighted the success of the PKTT. Both advocate Elaine Harrison and Fanny Masemola agree that the PKTT was both successful and essential in the criminal justice system. Fanny Masemola says that the success of the PKTT ultimately lies in its development of intelligence on how political hits are engineered. He pointed to things like higher detection rates, higher prosecution rates, and movement on stalled cases. And he says that all of these things gave the PKTT what was essentially an unmatched success rate.
So Elaine Harrison says that she considered the PKTT essential and necessary not only for KZN, but the whole country. This is to the point that when she heard about the disbandment of the PKTT on social media while she was on leave, she thought it was fake news.
Okay, now we can move on to week 3.
Remember how we talked about a raid on Brian Mokhotzi's business? Well, there was also a raid at Kat Mahlala's home. So in a video that was posted on social media, we see that the counterintelligence team is carrying out a firearms compliance investigation. And as a result of this inspection, they confiscated a number of guns from Mahlala's home.
Now, a video of this raid was sent to Mahlala by Mokhotzi. On January 1st, Mokhotzi sent him a message saying, "The task team that came to your house and harassed you has been dissolved/disbanded." Now, along these lines, it's important to note that General Khumalo stated that Mokhotzi had access to police information that he shouldn't have had. And we can assume that that is what happened here. Okay, now we can move on to week 4 of the commission.
So this week, witness X takes a stand. And we have no information about this witness in order to protect their identity. This is in large part due to the sensitivity of the information that they're sharing. Most of this witness's testimony had to do with police connections to none other than Kat Mahlala.
4 main connections were revealed. The first major connection that was revealed was to the head of the KZN Hawks. This is to Major General Lesetja Sonona. So witness X accused Sonona of using his position to benefit Mahlala in multiple property and business ventures. They also accused him of preventing the cancellation of Mahlala's Medicare 24 contracts with SAPS and of accepting payments from Mahlala. So these messages, pictures of these messages were circulating around X, and they basically just show that there has been a lot of correspondence between Mahlala and between Sonona. The second one of Mahlala's connections that were uncovered was with the Ekurhuleni Police Chief Julius Mkhwanazi. Witness X accused him of unlawfully fitting Mahlala's car with blue lights that are meant to be used for emergency vehicles like police and ambulance.
The third connection was with forensic expert and research associate at UJ, Calvin Rafadi. He's accused of having ties to Kat Mahlala and tampering with evidence.
So these pictures are more messages that were circulating around Twitter that are between Rafadi and Mahlala, and it basically shows Rafadi constantly asking Mahlala for money, specifically for petrol, it seems.
Now the fourth connection was with a businessman from the Northwest, Suleiman Kareem. He's accused of using his connections to aid Mahlala and is linked to a syndicate made up of politicians, police officers, and business people. So in these messages that were floating around on Twitter, we can see that Suleiman Kareem tells Mahlala that Morgan is sorted. Now this Morgan could be a reference to Hangwani Morgan Mamela, who is just in the news for his 810 million rand scandal with Timbiza Hospital.
And now we can move on to the most recent week, week 5. So in week 5, there were 3 anonymous witnesses. And all of these witnesses are supposedly police officials that investigated crime syndicates and their relationships to politicians and police members. Witness A went into more detail about the Ahmed Swart murder. He said that Swart was ambushed when he got to work on the 17th of April 2024 and that he was shot 23 times. And as a lot of people suspect, he did back up the claim that it was a case of mistaken identity. Suspected organizers of the hit, according to Witness A, were Katiso Molefe and his nephew Lucky Molefe. Now what's interesting about this is that Lucky Molefe worked at Transnet and he was responsible for getting the railway material that was at the center of the fraud findings in that Transnet contract that we talked about earlier.
The witness says that they found phone records that indicated that the shooters were hired by Molefe. They also shared that 3 others were arrested, including Michael Puletau, Musa Keka, and Diego Floyd Mabusela. All three witnesses have also said that the PKTT wouldn't have been as successful if there weren't as many members on the team. They also spoke about how Katiso Molefe's bail hearing was biased.
So both witness A and B said that they had heard from sources close to Molefe's case that he had paid 2.5 million rand to ensure that he was granted bail. Okay, so we're currently in the middle of week 5 as we're filming this. But these are some updates that just came out yesterday. A ballistic report was presented to the commission that showed that weapons used in the murder of Armin Swart were connected to more than 20 other murder cases.
The AK-47 that was recovered was linked to at least 10 other cases. That includes the murder of DJ Vitos and DJ Somebody.
I also just wanted to go through some of the social media reactions that I've seen to the Madlanga Commission and sort of see what we think about them.
You know, I didn't know I was this interested in politics until the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry Izolo, when General Thingy Mkhwanazi was on stand. China, it was hot. I was just there like,
I think if anything really good has come out of what we've discovered about this commission, it's that South Africans are really taking a real interest in South African politics and what's going on within not only our criminal justice system, but a lot of our other systems as well.
Yeah, I think it highlights the fact that South Africans are willing to be active participants in our politics.
You know, I still ask myself to this day that what was going to happen if it wasn't for General Mkhwanazi's press briefing on the 6th of July, because a lot is being revealed to us, and had it not been for him, a lot was going to be happening in South Africa.
I think what this video really makes me think about is the fact that this is just the criminal justice system that this commission is looking at. We don't know what's going on within any of our other systems. And I think it's caused a big fear in a lot of South Africans about the fact that we don't know a lot about what goes on in each of our systems. We don't know about the connections between different politicians and business people. And I think that can be really scary.
I've developed a new and irrational fear, and that is that General Mkhwanazi is going to say my name next.
You know what he did? He said a lot of names. He really did.
Watch out, he might be coming for you.
Maybe it's you.
Yeah.
You're next. So this commission is obviously still going on, and more details will definitely come out before we upload this. But what we do know is that criminal connections within the police system are concerningly deep. And the groups like the PKTT are essentially under the domination of these criminal syndicates. Now, we will be following this commission daily to keep you guys updated on what it uncovers. So make sure to send us any questions you may have, and we'll do our best to cover them.